Hi everyone, Josh Knutson with Bytespeed here for our USET 2025 presentation. This is going to be all about hardware for esports, moving beyond just playing games, especially with the state of Utah and the Activities Association formalizing things a little bit. We thought it was a great time to talk through what you need to get started, some helpful resources to get you there, and be there as somebody that you can rely on if you need more help in starting your esports journey. Speaking of journeys, mine actually gets going way back in 2016. I was the first selected head coach and program director of esports for the University of Jamestown. My alma mater, the school that I was working at in the marketing department, we started one of the first 20 varsity programs in the country. And I was lucky enough to lead that team and build that team from scratch. And I did that for 3.5 years. It was an awesome way to get acquainted with the esports and gaming industry, and helps out a ton in my job now as the Gravity Gaming Solutions Director, the guy that's in charge of all of our esports activations here at Bytespeed. And that's a job that I started in May of 2019, and it's almost been 6 years, and it's hard to believe. I've also been an advisory board member for a couple of different organizations. NACAD, the National Coaches Association. I did that from 2018 to 2024, sharing my knowledge and experience and expertise with schools and colleges all across the country. And then at Marshalltown Community College, something I started just a few years ago, helping to kind of be a industry perspective on a small board that helps this small community college in Iowa do some really great things with esports. They're doing awesome stuff on the academic side and the competitive side too. So really thankful to still kind of be involved with the day-to-day of a school, but more in a kind of more hands-off type of role. So that's enough about me. What we're here today to talk about is how do you build this at your school, right? This is Huntington College down in Montgomery, Alabama. Obviously a collegiate deployment that Bytespeed helped with, but this is kind of your stereotypical esports setup, right? There's a dark space, the lights are off, there's LEDs everywhere, there's high-end machines, a stage, consoles, a big screen to watch. And this is like what everybody wants to kind of shoot for when they're building out their own programs. But there's a lot that needs to go in before you can take a blank space and call it home for your program. And it all kind of starts by asking the question, like, why esports in the first place, right? And there's a number of reasons. And the big one is for sure student engagement. Schools put esports programs in to get more kids involved. It's the most common reason why, and it's a super impactful thing if you can pull it off to empower those students. You're expanding opportunities to participate at the competitive level. And there's probably over 20 states now that you can play for a state championship in esports, just like football, just like basketball. And in a lot of cases, those students, this is the only thing that they're doing at those schools. They're not athletes in the traditional sense. They're not part of the band or the choir or the theater or any of those kind of like fine arts programs, right? Esports and gaming is their thing, and it's the only thing they do. Retention a lot of times improves, and that could be a reason why you're adding a program. Getting kids to stay in class, show up just in general, stay at your school instead of transferring out. That was a big thing in the college world a few years ago, to go along with just recruiting new students in, building your enrollment, making sure that if a new family moves to your area and they're looking at school districts, like, if you've got an esports program, that's a differentiator, and giving those students a chance to grow socially and emotionally. We've known for a long time that being a part of extracurriculars is a really good thing. You learn teamwork, communication, critical thinking, conflict resolution, all these really great soft skills. And esports is no different. It's, a mouse and a keyboard instead of a basketball and a hoop, but those benefits are still there. And I could go on and on and on. The list is a mile long on reasons why you would add a program. But I think as long as you have a clear goal and a real mission of why you're building it out, you're going to be more successful than the programs that kind of are just keeping up with the Joneses. Those are the teams and the programs that struggle to have attendance after, the first 6 months to a year. Things aren't going as well as they had hoped because they're just adding a program for the sake of adding a program. So keep in mind what your North Star is, why you're building esports in the first place. And then we can ask, where do I create my space? I've seen esports labs go in so many different places in a school. Everywhere from, a library to a classroom to an old computer lab to the freaking cafeteria at the end of the day, right? And so there's a lot of different ways to do this. And, as long as we have kind of like our physical needs checklist kind of taken care of, there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different spaces to consider. The big things: power, internet, square footage, accessibility, right? These are all hallmarks of a good facility. We turn 15 computers on, we're not going to blow power to half the school. We have wired internet access so that we can access content that's on the internet. This is a digital sport. We have to have the web to be able to play. Square footage: how much can I actually stick in this classroom or in this space? If I've got 50 kids that want to participate and I have room for 5 of them in a closet, that's probably not a great space to look at, right? And then making sure that all students that want to participate have the ability to. Accessibility is a huge thing in esports. You're going to have students that might be in a wheelchair or have other physical differences that mean they can't play traditional sports, but they have that competitive nature, that urge to compete. Somebody in a wheelchair can wheel up to a computer and play the same as their able-bodied counterpart and peer that's sitting next to them. So making sure that the space is accessible to everybody is a really, really good thing. HVAC and lighting, making sure that the heat and the cooling work for the building. That was something that we unfortunately didn't have right away when I was at Jamestown. The lab that we were in did not have working AC for the first year, and I know like North Dakota is known for being cold, but in the summertime, like August, September, we hit 100 degrees up there. So all of a sudden you put 15 PCs and a bunch of students in a lab, turn everything on, shut the door. I got uncomfortable pretty quick. So making sure that that's taken care of. On the lighting side, making sure that it's a bright and welcoming space. Maybe not having LEDs everywhere be your only light source. It's better for your eye health to have actually good natural light, or maybe it's something that you can kind of like change on a dimmer or something like that, and not having just like the blue light strain of like only having PC monitors be your light source. And then the last thing, like, will this be a multi-purpose space? Over half the schools, over half the programs that we work with, they're sharing their machines and their space with somebody else in the school. It could be an engineering class that's doing AutoCAD, or the yearbook group that needs to use the machines for Photoshop or something like that. Making sure that the other teachers, the other students, that their needs are also met on the curriculum side, as well as the gaming team and the stuff that you're going to do for esports. So having those conversations early, involving all the right folks, those are things that will make you much more successful when it's time to actually deploy equipment and get going. So then what do I put in my space, right? This is the big question. And it kind of starts with, if you've seen the movie Ford versus Ferrari, I'm going to steal that again, but in a little bit different context, right? I like that analogy because, like a Ferrari is really cool, and I want a Ferrari. But what I need is a Ford Fusion that's going to take me from A to B for 20 years, safely, reliably, dependably, affordably. And I can apply that thinking to my esports equipment, right? What are my priorities? What's my budget? How do I maximize those things? And take advantage of my available space and what we already have in the school. So when it comes to infrastructure, that's kind of like the first priority, right? Like I said, it's a digital sport. We need the internet to be able to play. So looking at what does your existing connection look like? You do not need to go overboard. And you might be thinking to yourself like, well, Josh, we've got 500 Chromebooks and a bunch of phones and other devices and iPads and other computers that are accessing our bandwidth constantly. Like our network is always being run. I don't know if we can add more stuff and have a good experience doing it. What I will tell you is that most esports happens after school when a lot of that other traffic is done for the day, right? When we started the program at Jamestown, I had 15 machines on a 500 meg connection, and that was fine to get started. Now we eventually outgrew that, right? We added more students, more devices. Our need grew, so we did up that to a gig after that first year. But we started with just kind of an existing connection. Now we were lucky that the lab that we were in had its own line of internet. We weren't sharing that with the rest of campus, so it was totally separate, which was great. Not everybody is going to be that lucky, so kind of like common practice is to separate out that network traffic with like a VLAN. Get it away from the rest of the school. Kind of house your esports machines on their own network, so that you can control the permissions and do things a little bit differently than the general computer lab or the office PCs that your secretary, principal, teachers use. Another kind of common thing that pops up is those firewall permissions, and that is a discussion you are going to need to have right away. So meet with your network administrators and come up with a strategy on, are we opening these ports for just a couple hours a day? Or is it going to be connected to the network at all? Is it going to be just off the domain and managed in a different way that has a little bit more access to the games, but also does not compromise the security of the rest of our network and the rest of our devices and data? You're going to want to have those conversations really early on to avoid a headache and pain points down the road. If you can, always shoot for wired internet over Wi-Fi. You don't want 15 desktops trying to fight for one access point worth of Wi-Fi. You're going to have a much better time if they have a dedicated Ethernet connection. It's going to be easier to manage. It's going to perform better. Your students are going to have a better experience. And it's just going to eliminate a lot of unnecessary headaches. So when you're choosing a space, if it's already wired for that many computers, awesome. If, like I said, you can run new cables, new drops, also an option. If the answers to those questions are no, maybe we need to look at a different room in the school. And then finally, on the infrastructure side, coming up with an update strategy is really, really important. The game of basketball has had the same rules relatively for the last 20 years. Esports gets new rules every 2 weeks. There are patches and updates that happen all the time on a regular basis for just about every game that gets played in esports, right? There are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, you can expect new updates to happen, and you need to download those updates before you can launch the game and compete. So making sure that either you're doing things in off hours or you have a caching appliance or something that's going to help speed that up. The last thing you want is for it to be 3:45 and you're getting ready to hop on and play a game against another school at 4 o'clock. And then all of a sudden you've got an 8 gig update for Overwatch or something. And now all of a sudden we're not starting on time, or my warm-up time is gone because we're sitting there waiting for 5 computers to download that update before we can play our match. So come up with a strategy. It's going to be very similar to how you update Windows or other things, right? You need to download that patch before you can do anything with that computer. So that brings us to devices, right? PC's most popular platform for esports, the most number of titles that get played, the best diversity, the best performance. But the big answer, or the big question, is like, how many do I need, right? And it kind of depends on what titles you're playing. Most games like Overwatch 2, League of Legends, Valorant, a couple other ones out there, they're all 5-on-5. So the minimum roster size would be 5 PCs, 5 players for that game. If you're playing Rocket League, that answer is actually 3 is all. that you would need to get started. And there's a lot of schools that get started just with a Rocket League team. They build that proof of concept and grow it over time. The goal, or like what most school districts will do, is they'll take that minimum required number and double it so that they can have an A squad and a B squad playing against each other in practice. Scrimmaging, competing, maybe 2 different titles playing at the same time. But having enough devices to where we've got student participation at the level it needs to be. The other kind of balancing thing is like, if I've got 40 students that want to play or participate and I only have 10 machines, what do I do with the other 30 kids, right? Do I need to schedule different practice times throughout the week or throughout the day, or get them into shoutcasting and broadcasting and content creation to go alongside the competitive nature of like sitting down at the PC and playing. So things to think about when you're deciding on how many machines to buy. As far as specs are concerned, the good thing is esports titles are pretty well optimized. The developers of these games want as many players as possible, so they're not going to make a barrier to entry on the hardware side to where I need a $3,000 computer to launch Rocket League, right? We're going to be on the other end of the spectrum where we've got the bare minimum to run the game, which is like your normal kind of entry-level gaming PC, and then planning for the future. When's the next time I'm going to be able to afford to update these or add to the fleet? So kind of balancing out those two things. So some example builds here. This is kind of our, on the left-hand side, the entry-level build. This is our gold standard for esports in the K-12 space. It's a mid-level processor like your i5, Ryzen 5, 16 gigs of RAM, a terabyte worth of storage, and like an Intel B580 or NVIDIA 4060 for a graphics card. Nothing crazy, but a dedicated graphics card that's going to help our gaming performance immensely than just like trying to play on integrated graphics. And then you've got like a standard heatsink, a good power supply. That build is going to run most esports titles with no problems. You're not going to be cranking settings up to ultra and cranking things out and turning ray tracing on and those type of things. You're going to be playing at competitive settings and you're going to have a fine time for sure. Your students are going to have a great time with that type of a build. Now, if you're going to stream, do a little bit more with those machines. Maybe there's some curriculum stuff that needs a little bit more. Maybe you're running flight simulator stuff or other programs, or you just want to do more with those machines. Then we can maybe look at like the mid-tier option where we're going to bump up the processor a little bit, maybe add 16 more gigs of RAM. But the rest, as far as storage, heatsink, power supply, that stuff should stay relatively the same. But maybe we bump the graphics card up to like a 4060 Ti or 4070 Super. This will change now that we're into 5000 series GPUs, but the thought is there, right? It should just be like a step up from your entry-level system. That'll play all of the titles that are out there. It'll help with streaming, other kind of content creation type stuff. And you're going to have a really, really great time using those applications with that mid-tier system. And these will not break the bank, right? The number that I give folks a lot of times is like on the entry-level side, if you're going to do that build with peripherals, about $2,000 a system is what you're going to expect to pay. And a lot of times you come in under that, right? On the mid-tier side, add $500 to accommodate for some of those, 2-3 upgrades that you're going to do. And you're going to have a really rock-solid rig for a really long time. Speaking of peripherals, kind of the extra accessories that you need to get going, on the display side, 24-inch monitors that are 144 hertz refresh rate, that is the gold standard. You don't need to go bigger than that. You don't need to go waste money on like a curved monitor. That doesn't do anything for your team other than just like look cool. It doesn't give you any added performance, doesn't give you any competitive edge. You're just going to spend more money and not really get anything out of it. On the keyboard mice side of things, look for stuff that's mechanical. We use the Logitech G series. It's great, effective, affordable stuff that's going to last a lot longer. You can customize it and do a little bit more with those devices than like your standard, mouse and keyboard, right? Headsets, look for something that's over the ear. It helps with extra noise. You need to hear the game audio. You need to hear your teammates. And you need to be able to speak with your teammates to coordinate. And that's where having a microphone is a necessity for sure. You do not have to break the bank on peripherals, right? Headset, mouse, keyboard, $50 should get you a really rock solid one each. So you're looking at $150 across those three. A good monitor, $200 to $250. So, if you think $400 for peripherals ish, alongside a desktop that's anywhere from like $1,500 to $1,600, boom, there you're at your $2,000 mark, and have everything you need to get going. The other piece to esports, and definitely the more cost-effective option to get started, with some limitations for sure, but it is the console side of things. So the Nintendo Switch is an amazing platform to be able to get kids started for a really low cost entry. Right now, I will say I recommend the Switch OLED. It's the newer model of the base Switch. It's got an Ethernet port right on the dock, a little bit better screen. It's the newer model, so it's going to perform a little bit better, but the hardware is generally the same as the base Switch from 2017 or something crazy like that. Switch 2 was just announced. So this will change probably here in 2025 at some point. But for now, Switch OLED is the way to go. It's $350. Pick it up off the shelf at a Walmart or a Target or a Best Buy. And you're ready to rock and roll with things like Super Smash Brothers, Mario Kart, Splatoon. All those are really great titles to get started with on the console side of things. One thing to keep in mind is you're probably going to want to invest in some controllers and some storage, because consoles, especially a Switch, are really easy to just pick up and go. So having lockable storage that might even have like a display mounted to it, or it's a lockable charging cabinet or something, those are good things to think about. And then on the software side, you will need a Nintendo Online subscription. I think for a family plan that would let you use multiple consoles for the same subscription, I think that's $40 or $60 a year. I can't remember exactly what the price break looks like now. And for some games where you will need multiple consoles to be able to play, if you want to try and do Rocket League or Splatoon or something on the Switch, you're going to need multiple consoles. So you would be able to have all of those on ideally one Nintendo Online subscription. So those are kind of like the quick hitters for consoles. Definitely is the cost-effective way to get started, but you won't have a big of access to as many titles. You're going to be kind of just stuck with Super Smash Brothers, which is like in the top 4 competitive esports titles of all time. So a great option to get started, but it is a fighting game, so you're just one student playing at a time. So your numbers wise will be limited in that way, right? So then the big question, as I'm kind of ending my time here, is like, how do I pay for all this stuff? Josh, you mentioned $2,000 to set up. That sounds like a lot. Like, I don't know where the money's going to come from. It's a very common question and a situation that comes up all the time. So budgeting for esports can come from a lot of different ways. The goal should be an annual budget, just like basketball, just like band, just like your other extracurriculars that have that traditional funding, right? It could be from student life, it could be from athletics, IT, the Department of Underwater Basket Weaving, doesn't matter. But what you should work towards, and it probably won't be the case for the first year, but you should have an annual sustainable budget that you can pull from. Not everybody's going to start there, and that's why the rest of the stuff is on this slide, right? Grant writing is a huge way to help get funds for starting esports programs, for updating technology in a school. I've got a link here. If you take anything away from this presentation, is that bitesby.com/grant writing tips is the kind of home on our site for a bunch of info. Grant writing examples, a list of grants that you can look into that we know education folks have used in the past. Carl Perkins is linked right from there. Every state in the country right now has access to Carl Perkins funds. You can apply for it. I think we've even got an example PDF of a grant that we wrote with a school that you can use and copy and paste and kind of format it the same way. Big way that schools get funding, especially if you're going to use that kind of dual purpose model where there is curriculum being done with that equipment during the day. That's a great excuse to be able to say, hey, yeah, we're using this for CTE, career exploration. We got a grant for that. Oh, by the way, the same hardware as gaming PCs. Fundraising, good supplemental stuff that you can use every year. Stuff like e-team sponsor, clothing raffles and sales and things like that. My favorite fundraising story, a school that we work with in Southern Illinois, actually built an arcade cabinet in an 8th grade computer science class. They raffled it off at the end of the year. They sold, 50-50 tickets or raffle tickets for $25 a pop. At the end of the year, they raffled it off and they made like a few $1,000s in this small town in Southern Illinois. And it helped be, it helped with an equipment purchase and some other things. It's a really cool, creative way to do fundraising for their program. It was a hands-on activity in a relevant field for a lot of those kids. Great way to go. And then the last thing, sponsorships and partnerships. This comes up anytime you're talking about esports. What I will say is that to fill in the gaps and to go after these type of agreements with companies, start with your local businesses. Start with organizations in your community that are already invested in helping the school and the students thrive with their education, right? Lions clubs, Knights of Columbus. There's a million different groups out there that are community organizations that their entire reason for existing is to give money to help community causes. And what better way than to get the school on board, right? The other thing is, like, if I go to Frank's Plumbing down the street in downtown Farmington where I live, right? And I'm going to say, hey, Frank, I know you've got one of my esports kids is a part-time employee for you. Would you consider giving us even just like a few $100s so that we can pay for jerseys for this year? We'll put your logo on the jersey. We'll shout you out during our streams and put your logo up. That's great advertising for a local business, right? You're going to have parents and community members and Booster Club members watching your stream, because that's the way that we support esports, right? Is by watching. We can't buy a ticket and go to a stadium and watch a football game the same way that we can do it for esports, right? We're watching a stream on YouTube or Twitch or something like that. For a few $100s, that's great advertising that you can do for those local businesses. And then, talk to your booster clubs, traditional donors to the school, see if they have a passion for gaming and would like to help out. I think if you take that approach to it, you're going to be way more successful than trying to get a hold of a national company, that has never heard of your school before and gets asked 1,000 times a day if they would sponsor their esports program. So start local, and I think you'll have way more success. That's it. That is kind of like your half-hour crash course on esports. I hope you learned something. Please feel free to take a snapshot of the QR code here right below me. Oh, right there. If I can, yeah, right there. That goes to my DOT profile. You can book a meeting with me. You can send me an email or give me a call if you have questions. Would love to connect and help you out in your esports journey. Everybody's going to start from a different spot, and I think it's important that we stick together as a community and that we share as much knowledge as possible. So please feel free to connect and have a great conference. I know the digital stuff goes up a little bit before the actual event starts. So if you're in the vendor hall, feel free to stop by our booth. Would love to talk to you in person as well here at the conference and help you out with your esports journey. So thanks so much. Really appreciate your time, and we'll hope to see you at USET 2025.